If there's one thing I love more than America, it's banks. So you can imagine how conflicted I felt earlier this year when the King of America, Donald Trump, started going after the King of America's central bank, Jerome Powell.
I don't like him. The Fed chairman's incompetent.
This guy is a numbskull.
We have a stupid person, frankly, at the Fed. He's done a bad job.
Do you believe the president has the power to fire or demote you?
Not permitted under the law.
Not what?
Not permitted under the law.
So it might sound fun to watch the central bank get injected with enough drama to make Andy Cohen bust live in front of a studio audience. But some buzzkills say that this hissy fight could actually threaten to destabilize the global economy. So what's really at risk in this big bureaucratic bank beef? Today, we investigate. America's central bank, known by its stage name, the Federal Reserve, was created to protect our country from financial crises. You can think of it like a bank for banks. A real bank's bank, if you will. A bank that the banks go to when they want to bank. The main function of the Fed is to keep the economy steady and stable by controlling interest rates. When times are tough, the Fed lowers rates to try and make it cheaper for everyone to borrow money, speeding up the economy and increasing hiring. When things run too hot, too much money flowing around, creating price inflation, well, that's when the Fed raises interest rates, effectively shooting a tranquilizer dart directly into the flabby ass of the United States economy. The decision on how to adjust interest rates is made by the Federal Open Markets Committee. This is led by Fed Chair Jerome Powell, who was actually appointed by President Trump in his first term. These guys make their decisions without any input from voters or government officials. In other words, the Fed is designed to be independent. As you can see, the Fed Hot Chili Peppers play a crucial calculating role in our country's long-term financial planning. They alone get to decide when to raise or lower interest rates, one of the single most powerful policy tools wielded by anybody in the government. A tool that it sure seems like the current president would prefer to wield for himself.
So he's putting a lot of pressure on Powell.
Richard Sylla is a financial historian and former professor of economics at the NYU Stern School of Business, who I arguably felt too comfortable with.
So, Uncle Dickie, can I call you Uncle Dickie?
Sure. My students used to do that.
Broadly, what is the argument in favor of having an independent central bank?
The argument for an independent central bank is basically that the independent central bank can take a long view. If the politicians control the central bank, politicians have very short-term objectives, not long-term price stability. Politicians want to be elected at the next election.
You couldn't run a campaign off of the promise of, I guarantee price stability in 20 years.
Why would any politician say that when their terms are at most 2, 4, or 6 years? President Trump ran on the notion that Joe Biden caused a lot of inflation in 2021, 22, and that was bad, and I'm going to bring back price stability. That was one of his promises. He's thinking about short term, and maximizing his own political power, and that's the view, basically. I mean, this goes all the way back to my own particular hero, Alexander Hamilton, who was one of the American founders, and he founded the first central bank, the Bank of the United States. He wrote this great report on the report on a national bank, it's called. He said if the government controlled the central bank, it would be only a matter of time before the power to create money would be abused, and so you want to make sure that the politicians don't have the power to control the central. That's Hamilton. I can't think of anybody who talked about the reason you want to have an independent central bank before Hamilton.
What a collective waste of our time that bullshit was, huh? Folks, what you're watching right there is me looking absolutely radiant at one of our Good Work Live shows. The rest of the show was just as kick-ass, and guess what? You can watch it today on our Patreon page. That's right, I thought I would use this time to make a quick ad for our favorite company, us. A few weeks ago, we decided to do what any creator who's anxious about their future monetary prospects does and launch a Patreon. Good Work Incorporated LLC S Corp now has a page on Patreon where you can find other neat exclusive stuff from us, including footage of the Good Work Live shows like right here, ad-free episodes of this here YouTube channel, special exclusive long-form interviews, and a bunch of other shit that falls into the genre of we haven't thought about it yet. Within our Patreon subscribers, there are a few tiers that we offer, from shareholder to board member and angel investor. Like I said, our first episode of Good Work Live is already out, hot, freshened for you to watch. So what are you waiting for? Sharpen your pencils, put on a nasal strip, and slap a sticker on the back of your laptop that proves to people you have a personality. It's time to join the enterprise. Sign up for Good Work's Patreon today. Even though there are many differences between our current central bank and the one first devised by Lin-Manuel Miranda in the 18th century, the core idea remains the same. In order for the central bank to serve the long-term economic interests of the United States, it has to be independent from politicians whose interests are inherently short-term. And yet President Trump has taken his indefatigable gamma ray of rage and pointed it directly at the Fed's political independence. Just in the past few months, President Trump has threatened to fire Jerome Powell over an over-budget renovation project. He's battling in court to remove Fed Governor Lisa Cook over flimsy mortgage fraud allegations, and he appointed his own Council of Economic Advisors Chair Stephen Myron as an interim Fed governor. Now apparently, none of this shit has ever been done by a sitting president ever before, but Trump's done it all while making clear he wants those COVID-era high interest rates lowered, which he insists will thrust the economy into high gear.
There's things that you can do that will be like a sugar high, where you can feed the economy a short-term interest rate that will make things much better for a short period of time.
Anil Kashyip is an economist and professor at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. In September, Anil twinned up with Citadel CEO, 33rd richest man in the world, and billionaire Trump donor Ken Griffin to write an op-ed saying that Trump's interference in the Fed could have serious economic consequences.
I got to the point where I thought, the administration had crossed a line. There's got to be a line in the sand here that just says, no mas. You guys don't burn down 50 years of investment in trying to have a good central bank just to try to, win the next 2 months worth of growth.
What Anil's saying here is that investors and business folk love the Fed because of its credibility. The belief that the central bank can use its powers to tame inflation allows people to feel safe investing their money in the United States. Anil told me that the last time the US lost that credibility was during a little time called 50 years ago, when our last fun president, Richard Nixon, tried his own pressure campaign on the Fed, marking the worst thing Nixon ever tried to do.
So in the 1970s, President Nixon threatened the chairman of the Fed by trying to embarrass him to say, you're going to cut interest rates so I can get reelected. Exactly the kind of thing that we're worried about. The Fed caved in and did it. That set off a bout of inflation.
No president, I think, has gone so far as to say, I want to fire the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, or I want to get rid of these members of the Federal Reserve Board who aren't voting the way I think they should. No previous president, not Lyndon Johnson, not Richard Nixon, not Ronald Reagan. They never went that far.
Okay, Uncle Dickie, but if Trump's pressure campaign is so bad, then why have our markets been at all-time highs? I mean, just in the past few years, political influence in Turkey and Argentina's central banks have created inflation and market turmoil out the wazoo, which I think is Turkish and Argentinian for shit economy.
I am surprised there has not been more of an impact on longer-term interest rates, that people haven't said, wow, the risk that inflation really gets out of hand and we have a repeat of the 1970s is materially higher now than it was.
So that's the question, is why has the bond market been pretty calm and not reactive to all these efforts?
Sam Goldfarb is in the office phone booth behind me, as well as a markets reporter for the Wall Street Journal with hefty bond market experience. Government bonds are basically when you loan money to the US government, which they promise to pay back at a future date with interest. When bond investors expect inflation, they demand higher payouts to make up for it, so the return on the bonds goes up. It's why people usually look to the bond market for signs of inflation fears. But throughout all this chatter that threats to Fed independence would stoke inflation, the bond market didn't really move. So it seems like folks aren't expecting all this hullabaloo to actually amount to anything.
Basically, bond investors are just doing the math and saying it would be hard for Trump to get a majority in the near term. And then on top of that, if investors were worried that the Fed really had lost its independence and was going to, lower interest rates a lot, they would be worried about inflation. Bond prices would go down, interest rates would go up. And then Trump would not get what he wanted, which is lower interest rates. so they think that they don't think that someone would be that irrational. Their expectation is that even if Trump were to get, loyalists on the Fed, that they would sort of be forced by the market and by the economic realities to be at least semi-rational.
Now, I wasn't listening to anything that Sam just said, but my assistant tells me that Sam's basically saying that bond investors are betting that all this political pressure campaigning and talk of firing right now is Trump just saying shit. But that is still just a bet. I mean, what if he does truly do something to permanently alter the relationship between the Federal Reserve and the White House? Looking ahead, Jerome Powell's term is up in May, opening the door for Trump to appoint someone more loyal to him as chair of the Federal Reserve.
You'd like to have somebody that kind of understands the job, that's going to weigh all the evidence, isn't going to be calling the White House every Friday and say, "What do I do next week, boss?" That's not what we want, and not what's going to serve the public best. So everything Mr. Trump has done in terms of appointing loyalists throughout the government suggests that he's going to try to find somebody that's more malleable than Chair Powell has been. And I think that won't end well.
Indeed, it sounds like that's a future we should do our best to avoid, Anil. And despite markets not being too flustered over Trump's maligning, it does seem like come May, Trump will have the opportunity to appoint someone who will just do whatever he says. And given everything I've learned throughout this program on just how important it is to maintain a central bank that's independent from political influence, well, it seems like I have no other choice but to do the right thing and offer up my services. That's right, I, Dan Toomey of YouTube, am officially throwing my hat into the ring to become the next chair of the Federal Reserve. I guarantee you I won't listen to the president. Matter of fact, I won't listen to anyone. I hate listening. It sucks ass. When I do interviews in these programs, they just put up a pre-recorded video of me nodding and making the eyebrow face. I have no idea what anyone has said the entire time. And that's independence, if I've ever heard of it. And I haven't. For good work, and for the Federal Reserve, I'm Dan Toomey.
I love your show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Sometime around 1967 or 68, the Fed was trying to prevent inflation by not putting interest rates down. In fact, maybe raising them because the inflation rate was going up and bond yields were going up because of this excessive spending on the Vietnam War and the Great Society. So Johnson invites Martin to come and visit him down at his ranch in Texas. Apparently Johnson had a Cadillac convertible there, and he puts the head of the Federal Reserve, William McChesney Martin, passenger seat, front seat of the Cadillac, and Johnson proceeds to get in the Cadillac and drive around his ranch really fast, going over all kinds of bumps and all that. And along the way, he's saying, "Martin, you can't really raise interest rates." And so this was almost physical intimidation, delivering the message that you shouldn't raise interest rates.
A high school bully once did a similar thing to me when he wanted to date my sister.
Ah.
When you see something
Will that be
like,
part of the program?
that would be the start of the program.